Have you wondered what financial advisors actually think about finances? This is your sneak peek at the conversations within Financial Design Studio. Michelle Smollenberger, the CEO here, will be your host as you go behind the designs.
All right, welcome back to the podcast, Behind the Designs. I am your host, Michelle Smollenberger, the CEO and a financial advisor here at Financial Design Studio. And in a recent podcast, we talked about managing your parents' finances well. And a part of managing your parents' financial lives is also the actual physical belongings that they have. So even your estate planning documents will take these into consideration. They'll talk about who should get what. But how do you sort through your parents or even your own possessions with all of the emotions attached? We can all think of that one thing. We're like, don't touch that. Most people don't want to deal with this issue, but today we are unwinding this big emotional ball that's finances, relationships, and stuff. And as our guest, so I have Ashley Rapp here today with us as a guest, and she is the founder of Hello Staging and Organizing. Ashley, welcome, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got into this organization and staging business?
Yes, thank you so much, Michelle, for having me.
Yeah.
I'm excited to be here and share a little bit about what I do and how I help people. I got into my business 3 years ago. That's right around the time we met. I was transitioning out of a corporate human resources role that I had worked really hard to get to, and but it wasn't making me happy. I was craving flexibility. I was craving creativity. We were expanding our family. And once I learned that home staging and home organizing was something that I could do and earn money from it and really help people ultimately, I jumped at it and I haven't looked back. And I've continued to grow. I was just telling you that I've added some women to my team, and it's been just fantastic. Yes.
Great.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Let's back up. Ashley and I originally met in a book club. So this was, I think, a few years ago, which was a great book club, by the way. It was really fun. And so at that time you were kind of, I remember, we talk about our book, but we also talk about life. And I remember that you were kind of working through this and having kids. And it's so funny because we talk about this as moms where we you start in your career, but then you're like, life does change. And we don't have kids when we start, and then we have kids, and you might need to pivot or change or want something different. So I love this. So I'm excited to hear how this process has been over the last few years as you've been creating this since then. So this is going to be a great conversation, I know, for people to listen to, because we're really going to get into a lot of the things to consider, like how to actually work through these. And so we'll kind of work our way to that. But I'm curious, were you like a really organized person before you got into this, this type of work? Was this something you had to learn a lot about, or kind of walk us through this process of starting your business?
So I would walk into a room. I still walk into a room, and it's like a Tetris puzzle to me. And I start kind of rearranging things, and I see the whole space. And so subconsciously, I'm like always spatial planning, I feel like. And it's always been fun for me. My husband and I have sold a couple homes, condos. I've helped friends and family get ready to list their home and kind of organize their spaces. In college, I would help my friends organize their closets. I always liked routine. I didn't know how to start a business. That's what I didn't know. So there's an association for home staging professionals, and in order to get certified, you go through a course, and then at the end of that, they actually teach you how to start a business. And that's what I did. I followed along with their kind of how-to and started an LLC. And then I started reaching out to local realtors, previous realtors that I had worked with in Chicago when we bought and sold a couple places, and then some local ones. And through relationship building and working together, it's gotten bigger and better, right?
I feel like an organized person is kind of this focused, disciplined, and everything's in order. So when you can walk in and just kind of visualize that, I mean, yeah, that's like a special gift because some people really desire that but don't have it. That would be me. So it's like really, I'm like,
we all have
I
our
really
strengths.
love that,
you know,
right?
we all have certain strengths. Yes.
And so that's where I think this is going to be really helpful. So walk us through. So there's kind of two main services that you do, and I think this is what's really interesting is there's the staging, so professional staging, and then home organization or just organizations. When someone comes to you, like what's usually happening in their life if they're, for either of those types of things, walk us through kind of what that's like.
Sure. So let's start with home staging. Typically, they are wanting to move or needing to move. Maybe they're downsizing. They've reached out to a realtor, or maybe they're about to reach out to a realtor, and they are like, I want people to come into this house and I want them to fall in love with it and make an offer, maybe over asking. I need your help to do that. Yep. So typically what I'm doing nowadays is partnering with realtors and they'll refer me. And I walk into a home and I offer them my home staging punch list report where they give me a tour of their space. They don't have to do anything before I arrive. I just want to see their house. And I make lists, I take photos, and I walk through and I give them recommendations. It's usually removing furniture. So there are some really great home stagers in the area that have a warehouse of furniture that bring in their furniture and take out the client's furniture. That's not me. That's not my business model. We all have too many things in our spaces. And so typically I'm actually removing items. I'm ensuring that there's clear walkways and pathways from door openings. I'm helping depersonalize and really declutter. And we'll get to the decluttering when we talk about organizing in a second. And so I give them that report and I said, this is what you need to do. It also includes potentially like a color consult. So maybe the interior of their home needs to be painted. And so I'll give them recommendations on that. But I also, start the consult. I'm like, what are you comfortable doing? Like, are you open to painting? Are you open to rearranging this furniture? Because I'm not going to, make them do something they don't want to do, or if it's out of their budget. So I work with what they have. There's so many great resources locally that are available to rehome people's items, and I can provide a list for that. But I work with a lot of people. I actually went to a sports memorabilia place today because when I'm going into homes, people are like, well, I think this is really valuable. What should I do with it? So having local resources helps me, but really helps my clients.
Right. And I could see like so much of this, like people have, I think we just have so much stuff. And this is interesting because I'm sure you probably see it with different clients you work with. Like it might be a generational thing. Like it'd be interesting. I don't know. Do you see that kind of in different generations? Do you see different items or amounts of items? Or do you see like younger people trying to get rid of things? I don't know. Like that's kind of what I would assume to see. But
so it depends on how big their family is. And then where their extended family is living. We're in Barrington, Illinois, right? So a lot of people have like gone to school here and then moved back, and their parents are still living close by. And a lot of times their parents will like bring over a lot of things. Like, oh, here's your yearbooks. Here's the Beanie Babies you played with as a kid. Maybe your kids want to play with them. Here's some of the decorations for the holidays that I don't want anymore, so I'm just going to drop it off to you. So it's not necessarily generational, it's actually like locational. Like if your family is close by, you're just getting stuff dropped off to you all the time. And you feel bad about it. And you're like, what do I gotta keep it, I guess, right? And then going back to the organizing question that you mentioned earlier, what does that look like? Organizing is, when I started my business, I was certified through the home staging network, if you will. Like I said, they teach you how to start this business. I wasn't just going to be a home stager. There's some great ones out there. There's also some really good organizers out there, but there's nobody that does both and offers both services. Because in my mind, you can't have one without the other. You can't go into someone's home and help them stage without decluttering. And decluttering is organizing. So on the organizing front, I go into clients' homes. Sometimes it's young families, so I'm working with moms. Sometimes I'm working with 50, 60-year-olds who are empty nesters and their kids are out of the house. And they're like, well, eventually I'm going to start downsizing.
Yeah.
Let's start that editing process now. And so sometimes it's just like, okay, I've got all these toys. What am I supposed to do with it? Or hey, can you help me change out my closet? The seasons are changing. So I tailor my services based on what their short-term and long-term goals are.
Okay. Yeah. No, that's really helpful because I can just think of different clients at different points. You mentioned one example, like people that are downsizing when they're older, or young families that need help, or they just don't have time to organize themselves. Like you said, it takes a lot of time, like as we've been talking about this, or someone passes away and now there's stuff that kind of has to be taken care of. And so these are the things that they're just kind of there. And a lot of times it's because an event has happened, or it's just, when should I make this transition? If we just kind of first were like, okay, we know that events in life happen. There's these things we have to kind of either react to or prepare for. And so what's interesting, if you were to say, because I just think as a financial advisor, there are some people that like need to work with an advisor. Some people, like, that's how their brain thinks and they're very organized and they want to do it themselves. Do you think this is for everyone, or it's kind of for like the specific group of people that say, I want to make sure, of something?
So I have two answers. The first one, from an organizing standpoint, no, you do not need a professional organizer to get organized. I can help kickstart you, right? An organizer can help kickstart you and start that momentum, because that momentum is very real. Once you start, you start to kind of learn and understand. And if you would prefer to for some outside help, and if you're open to that outside help.
Yes.
If you're not open, if you don't want somebody in your home, that's okay.
Yeah.
You can start small, okay? You don't have to be them. You don't have to be the Michael Jordan, right? You can start small with your junk drawer. You can start with your closet, taking everything out. You can start by, setting an hour timer and start with, I always say, the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
What's in your garage that you just need to get rid of. So that's the answer for the organizer.
Yeah.
From a home staging perspective, I say yes. You need a third party coming in there, because it's not going to be your home anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
You live in a home, but we market a house.
Yeah.
It's not going to be yours, like, ideally, for much longer, right?
Yeah.
If you're selling your house, you're selling it for a reason. So let's get it sold.
Yep.
And you need someone to come in and that's never been there probably before and look at it through a lens of a potential buyer.
Yeah.
And so a lot of realtors like to bring me in because I can, quote unquote, be the bad guy, and I'm not. I'm very nice and respectful, but I am very honest.
Yeah.
And I can read people. And so, if something, I have a client who's an artist, and beautiful, amazing paintings. I'd hang in one in my house, but there was just too many. Too many. And I was like, we have to take these down, store them, put them in a closet. We need to really showcase how large this space is. I don't want people looking at your paintings right now. So yes to the home stager.
Yeah. I think too, something you mentioned is you could be desiring these services, but you have to be willing to like be open to hearing what's said. And I think this is where we're really going to get into this here in a minute. We're so connected to our stuff. We're so connected to where we live. We love, you choose the paint colors in your house because you love them. And so you're like, so while I'm living here, but just like you just said, if you're not going to be living here and someone else is, like, let's help them envision it.
Exactly.
Okay. No, that makes sense. Let's kind of start to talk about when is the right time to get organized or for staging. So let's just talk about these times, kind of these transitions. When do you feel like if someone's out there saying, do I need these services? Like, these are probably good times.
From an organizing perspective, today. You don't have to wait for the perfect time. And I think that's why a lot of people don't get organized and don't try because they think it needs to be perfect. And it doesn't have to be. You don't have to spend a lot of money. You don't have to go out and buy the best top of the line product. Use what you have. We all have too much stuff. So the first step is taking everything out and sorting it and editing it, which means it's time to donate. It's time to give away. It's time to trash, recycle, rehome certain things that just aren't serving a purpose, that are just taking up very valuable space, right, in your home, and ultimately, like, in your being. And it really does. Like, let's say goodbye to these things. They're not serving a purpose, so that we open up something over here that has been waiting to come to you, right? I just did it the other day with my closet, and we don't have a huge, like, we have a little tiny walk-in closet, right?
Sure.
But that's it. I don't have another second closet of other clothes. Like, my closet is what I have. Yeah. And typically it's like, if something comes in, something comes out. The front and back of it, I switched around because it's getting cold now. And I went through and I was like, there was, I probably purged 10 or 15% of what I had. And it felt so good because I haven't done it in probably 6-7 months. Yeah. And I already felt better. I felt lighter. Okay, so that's the answer from organizing. Yeah. From home staging, when's the right time? I'd also say today, like, if you are thinking about getting your house or putting your house on the market, it's fall now. A lot of people do it in the spring, early spring. Okay. Do it now. There's probably some home repairs that you've been putting off that you need a handyman to come in or handy woman to come in and fix. Yeah. The leaves are changing and starting to fall. Get those outdoor photos now. Because if, like, let's say you want to list in January, it's going to be cold. It's going to be dark. It's going to probably have snow on the ground. Yeah. Get those really fall pictures done now, especially if you have a pool, before you close that pool.
Yeah. Those are great points. Yeah.
So it's now. Yeah. It's never too late, but it's also never too early to start.
No, so this is kind of like, as we talk about, like, the when, I think this is what a lot of people think. It's kind of like when something happens. So, I can think of a few clients where we had, like, all at once, and they were managing their parents' finances and stuff at the same time that they were trying to manage theirs. And so I just remember a lot of those conversations where it was kind of like, hopefully we close on the house, this week, or, I have someone coming to pick up, everything from the garage. And then this, and I just remember it's very busy when you're kind of trying to do it, like, as mom or dad is transitioning into their next home or after the fact. So it is really helpful too. And this is what we really want to touch on, is kind of like how we're connecting in, like, these relationships, how we're making those relationships really strong. And I think if we wait too long, then it's kind of like, we miss a lot of those opportunities. So you're either now having to make all these decisions without them and what they cared about. Exactly. So if you can do it together, it means so much. I actually did this personally with my grandmother. She recently passed away a couple months ago, but I went to her home, and we started kind of going through her things that were in her garage, because she had been in the garage for a while. And I'm like, Grandma, like, what are these things? Yeah. And some of them were, like, precious keepsakes that she was able to tell us about. Some of it was like wrapping paper. We're like, Grandma, you don't need this. And some other things were like, gifts, or, some other things that she wanted some of the grandkids to have. And she was able to tell us that. And I wrote on the box, who was it for? And my mom was there with us. And yes, it was very emotional. But this is what I do. It was super helpful, not only for me and my grandma, but my parents, to know what she wanted done with everything. Yeah. So it's a gift. It really is a gift if you could do it now. Yeah. And I think one of the things that you kind of touched on, you were saying, like, when you can enjoy those relationships. So even as you're doing this, I just think, like, how much closure, or how much of that emotional closeness that you're gaining as, even as they're aging and getting older, like, it doesn't mean that you don't have to let go as they're doing that. I think this is where it's you taking these opportunities to actually say, let's go through this together. And because I think as you do it, you probably hear, like, the memories of, I remember when you got this, or things like that. Like,
and she shared stories, and I told her stories, and it was valuable time, because let's be honest, when you're getting together with, grandparents or the older generation, sometimes you're just sitting there. And you're, like, watching TV, or you're, like, trying to have a conversation, and it's awkward. You're just eating dinner in silence. And so with my grandparents, I always enjoyed doing something. And going through the garage was, yes, it was emotional. And my grandmother didn't totally understand the act of donation. Yeah. But we got her there eventually. And it was something to do together. Yeah. So I definitely recommend it.
This is like in a very high level. I see what happens is, there's stuff that someone has. So let's just say it's our stuff, and let's fast forward 40 years. And now our kids are kind of like, Mom, do you really need this thing? And I'm like, but like we have attachments that someone else doesn't have. And so it's almost kind of comes across as they're judging you for how could you keep this stuff? And I don't think that is really happening. I think what is trying to be said, but is hard for people to say because of the emotional component is, like, let's do this together. Like, I want to help you. Do you still need this? But it's hard to let go because we're letting go of like the memory or the emotion instead of actually having that emotional conversation or that memory, sharing it together. And then we're kind of letting it go together. I think just if we reframe it into, wait, let's do this well. And you're not being judged or someone's not trying to push you.
No.
But do you kind of see that? Do you feel like maybe someone who's older feels like the younger person's like, come on, you need to let this go. And it's kind of harsh.
And that's why it's helpful when you have a third party. So I can come in and say, well, tell me about this. Like, what is this and why is it important to you?
Yeah.
And they'll tell me the story. And then I'm like, okay, I'm going to put it over here for right now. Just in kind of a, it's not going anywhere. It's just over here. Yeah. 5 or 10 minutes later, they'll come back and be like, okay, I'm ready to get rid of it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, okay, fantastic. Right. And it's also important to recognize that you don't have to do this for 8, 9, 10 hours a day. You can, a typical session is 3 hours for me when we're doing that type of work. When we're going through keepsakes and making a lot of decisions because everything we pick up, they have to make a decision on. Are we keeping it? Are we filing it? Donating it? Shredding it? What are we doing? And so it could take weeks. It could take months, depending on how many things you have. And that's why starting, now is better. But you don't have to spend all day on it either.
Yeah. No, I think that's really helpful because we're going to kind of move through like, okay, this is kind of some of the process, like as we're going through this, but I think this is where people do get stuck. It's this, okay, I don't want to get rid of my stuff. I'm not ready, but you want me to. And I think this is how you kind of reached out when you saw that podcast episode of like, managing people's finances. And I said, that's great. Like, we should have this conversation together. I like how you walk people through kind of this process of transitioning things. So I have seen clients where they're kind of thinking in their mind, like, it's probably time to downsize. And in their mind, honestly, they think they're doing it too early. So I've seen people where they're like, you know what, we're just kind of ready to do it. We think we should do it. And for whatever reason, like that was the year they chose. And it was maybe kind of early in their mind. They were like, we're not really old enough to do this, or we really don't have like that many health issues. But what happened is like the next year they had health issues. And so sometimes it actually works out to where it's like you moved at the exact right time because now like they would be stuck where they are, which may or may not work for the lifestyle now that they're living or the health issues that they're having. And so to your point too, of just like doing it now, like even taking those pictures like in the fall instead of winter, I think it's just so smart to kind of have this thought of what should we be thinking about? And sometimes too, I think people just kind of, they live in their home and they're like, we want to stay here, so it is a hard decision.
And if their home is, wheelchair accessible and there's a bedroom on the first floor and some people can do that, right? And if they have the means to have support that comes into the home, absolutely. But I do work with a lot of adult children who are trying to figure out what to do with their parents, and I do want to recognize that it can be a very difficult topic, a very difficult time. And I think with my HR background, and I was a psychology major in college, like I bring the empathy, right? I bring the compassion. And while, yes, I push the client along, I also, move at their pace, right? I've been working with a client specifically for like 2.5 years, and I've seen a lot of changes, and we've moved a couple different times, and we've downsized, and we've many different projects, and I can just be there for them, and they can just call me and say, hey, I'm ready. We're going to sell the condo now, and we're going to, move mom into this place. And I'm like, okay, let's do it, and so when I have those relationships and And then when I'm working in these facilities, right, I get to know the people, and I know who to contact to reserve the elevator. Like, I know what movers to call, and I know where the loading dock is. So I've gotten to, know those details. So it's just easier on the client because like you said, there's just a lot happening, mentally, physically, emotionally with the adult children and then their parents. And so this is just like a piece of it that I can kind of take off.
Yeah. I love that you have like the kind of the psychology background, the HR, like that's what's needed. I feel like in a lot of this to actually make it go really well and to reach that goal of really strengthening relationships. I feel like that's so important. So let's talk through where I think sometimes it can be easy when there's like one person. So let's say there's like one child and they're trying to help mom or dad downsize or figure out, okay, what needs to go with mom wherever she's going to be moving or doesn't. But let's talk about when you have 4 siblings and they've set the date and they're like, today's the day, it's moving day. Is that a great plan? Or and some of these things we've talked through is probably like setting that up for failure maybe. Or is it actually good when you have everybody there, but do you need to like assign who's going to do what? Like walk us through how families could do that well.
A couple clients come to mind where, both their parents have passed away.
Okay.
And so now we're dealing with a home that needs to be decluttered, depersonalized, staged. And there's, multiple adult children, right? Okay. Siblings. Usually there's only one that lives local.
Okay.
Many of the other ones have kind of, moved across the United States. And that person that's local is usually the person that's like the main person.
Okay.
The first thing that we do is what I tell my client is you need to identify what you want to keep. Like, what do you and your siblings and the grandkids and the aunts and uncles and all these people, what do they want out of this house? What's important to them? Okay. And let's identify that because, of course, I'm not going to get rid of it. Of course, I'm not, like, you take that, right? If there's anything of value, I actually have them take it out of their parents' house and bring it to their house. Okay. And then we start with the low-hanging fruit. Like, one, for example, was the summer, and I was like, this garage is going to be where we're actually going to move a lot of this extra furniture because they were thinking of maybe an estate sale or maybe a garage sale. And I was like, okay, well, there's too much furniture in this house. Yeah. So we need to use this garage as a kind of a storage spot. Okay. So they had to sell 2 cars. And then, there was like ant killer and like all the bug stuff outside, the garage things. And I was like, this all has to go. And it's so fantastic when a client can just be like, okay, I'll do it. And a week later I came back and it was ready. Yeah. And I give them some resources of like where they could dump certain chemicals and who can pick up what. And I've got a great junk company that does really good work. And then we go through, and then it's also kind of fun when they kind of help me. I'm like, okay, this dining room has like 12 chairs in it. It really probably could only fit 4, right? Okay. So we need to get rid of all these extra chairs. We took those to the basement. Yeah. And then they needed some extra support with like accessories because the home was older and, we're probably marketing to a younger family moving in with kids. So I brought in some of my accessories. I do offer an accessories kind of package where I'll bring in like a white bedspread and some different lamps and some greenery, simple things that I could put in my car, right? Yeah. And so I used what the client had. But then also I brought in some of my extra things. We got rid of some of the clothes. And those are questions I ask. Hey, like, do you want some help with this? Do you want me to do this? Or do you want to do it? He was like, no, I think I can do it. I'm like, okay, And then another question I always have is like, what's their timeline? Do you want to get this listed ASAP? And let's talk to the realtor and like, let's figure out what kind of their game plan is. And I'd say 75% of the time it's like ASAP. Okay, like let's get this going ASAP. But some people are like, no, I'm going to take my time. I'm not in a hurry. Okay. But it's also just good, like just like you. Like, what's your timeline? Yes. Like so we kind of back into that. So yeah, I hope that answers
And
your question.
and I think that's the thing where sometimes it's kind of like you have like a year,
Right.
Or you might be thinking like, hey, we're going to sell in a year. Some people, I think they know their house needs projects. So sometimes I'll hear these common questions of, we don't know if we should redo the kitchen or if we should sell it as is or things like that. So if you have kind of like that longer runway, okay, I can get these projects done, or just the basic ones where maybe it's just paint instead of overhauling everything. Because sometimes people don't want you to redo everything or they're going to rip that on anyway. So it's a waste of money.
And that's, those big investment questions, I can definitely provide my opinion. But from a market standpoint, that's a real estate.
Exactly. Yep. That's where I think it works great when you're kind of like, I have this timeline and so I can get these opinions, and then you can kind of like start to just kind of like work on those items as the year goes on. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about like your process of just, okay, someone's walking through this transition. And we've talked about how like first, like this can be really difficult. Like it's emotional. We've talked about how this can be hard for so many different reasons. When you kind of like break this down, what are some of the things that you're like, okay, let's simplify this so this doesn't become this overwhelming, daunting process? How do you kind of work through that?
Yeah, it's a phased approach, right? We can't, what's the term? Like, how do you eat an elephant? It's one bite at a time. And you're not eating the whole thing at once, right? And that's very similar to this. So we identify what has to happen first, okay? And, I come into the home, I assess, I'm asking lots of questions, the timeline question, how many siblings, who wants what, right? And then we talk about what can wait, someone had to sell a boat.
Okay.
And I was like, can that wait? Yes, it can wait. Like, that's not your first priority right now. I'm not going to sell this boat because it's like in the backyard. It's kind of hidden. Yeah. You're fine. Yeah. Like, let's focus on the inside right now. Yeah. That's something you're going to do next month.
Okay.
And then what's like the long-term plan, right? Are we, I'm assuming we're selling, but are we keeping some of this furniture? Are we downsizing? Are we getting rid of all of the furniture? And then are they staying in state? Like, where are they moving to? Like, are they moving to another house? Is it assisted living? Is it independent living? Are they moving to Florida? Like, those answers to those questions are super helpful for me when I'm identifying certain furniture. Because a lot of times I'm like, what are we doing like with this table? Yeah. Is this coming with you? Or do you want to try to consign it? Do you want... what are we doing with this? And it's totally 50-50. Sometimes we're like, it's definitely moving with me. And I'm like, okay, fine. Then we're going to keep it and we're going to stage it because I'm not moving this big table out of here. But sometimes there's like bookcases and just like random things that are like, no, I don't want that. I'm like, great, it's out of here, right? It's just taking too much space in the house. So we identify like kind of big furniture, and then we come in and we'll do like the accessory staging. Yeah. So it also just depends on like if they're going to help me or if they just want me to do it by myself. Okay. Totally fine either or. Yeah. But then I can also just give them homework, and I kind of check in with them. I'm like, okay, I'm going to come back on Friday and this is what we're going to do Friday. Yeah. And then, they'll have the drunk people come and then the last thing, I always say that photos don't pick up like a dirty house. Like if your house is like relatively clean, it's okay. You can get photos taken. It's not going to pick up dirt. But if it really needs to be cleaned, if it's pretty dirty, then that last step is let's get the cleaning person in here, So I help them throughout the timeline. And I kind of tell them what's next. Yeah. And usually like if I see them on a Monday and then I come back on a Friday, there's a lot that's happened, right? In those 5 days, maybe they've talked to their siblings. They're like, well, you know what? We actually are going to keep that now. Okay, fine. Great. I'll work that into my plan, you know? Or, we're actually not going to keep this. I'm like, fantastic. I'm getting it out of here. Yeah. So, small little steps.
Yeah, but that's why I love how you break this down. So this process, even thinking of, I think a lot of times when people think about when there's something that's really bothering you, so if it's organization, if it's your finances, whatever it is, you might have like a personal issue and you're like, I really want to make progress. And there is kind of this first step of really evaluating, like, where am I even starting from? And so I love that you're kind of like, okay, what needs to happen first? What are the big things? Because then, like you're saying, you're kind of, let's take those big pieces out of the way because then I really do agree with you that like when we have piles of stuff in our house, so if we just even think like a pile of mail or a book or something that sits in this place, it just takes your mental energy. Like if you're sitting at the table and you just keep seeing this thing, every time I look at that, I'm like, I really need to do something with that. And that just takes like, and then I'm like, okay, but right now I don't have time. And so it really does take, whether that's your thoughts, whether that's, just this mental energy of I need to do that, or the actually physical of doing it, it really does consume a lot of us. And so that's
sure
where
does.
I'm a big believer in like going
and if
through
you
this
have
stuff.
a lot of those little piles all over your house, that just drains you.
Yes, yeah.
Drains you.
Yeah.
So,
and the momentum you mentioned is really big, because once you start making those, I think what happens is a lot of times people actually like what they see, and they're kind of like, oh, I love that we're cleaning. I feel this is actually what I want. I want it to be more organized, or so it's funny. Someone told us when, so you know how like you live in your home and you have like these little projects that you're working on through the life that you live in your home. And someone told us, they're like, your house is always exactly how you want it the day you're ready to sell it. It's like you did all the things that you wanted, and now you're kind of like, I'm leaving.
Tell me that. Like, wow, why didn't I do this before? And I kind of just smile and like, yeah,
right?
But yeah, what a great lesson, right?
Well, I think this is the thing where it's like, I think you have seen people, I've seen clients where like we see people kind of break through kind of the initial burst of what's hard. Honestly, it's kind of this getting started. And I think this is where when someone says like, do I need help? Do I need a professional to help? It's really when you kind of feel overwhelmed by the big project, or you're not really sure, where do I even need to start? I mean, this is honestly like the first step when we start with clients is organization. We have like this whole blueprint, and we don't put any numbers on it, but like we're literally organizing, okay, here's insurance, investments, estate planning, because a lot of times people, when they think about their homes, so you're thinking about like these closets, these like spaces that clutter, we think about like, hey, there's all these different pieces of your finances, and people usually are kind of like, okay, I have my investments and my insurance, but they forget that like all these other pieces exactly are part of that. So I think when people need help, it's like that first help of let's kind of lay this out, and what's the process to go through. Yeah. So I loved when we first kind of started talking that you were like, hey, what can wait? What do we first need to do? Because I think those are some of the things where people think everything needs to get done all at once. But it's like, okay, we're going to cover everything, but let's kind of start so that we're all on the same page first.
Exactly.
All right. No, that's really helpful, because I think, okay, so the next step in this is like, how do people even start this conversation? So this is a big one, I think, when a big place people can get stuck to of, okay, how do I start? Maybe I'm the adult child who needs to kind of start to have the conversation with mom and dad. How do I do that? What are some great ways to say that? Or if you're the parent who says, I kind of need help, like what can you think of like some conversation starters to kind of...
I think so. If if your mom or dad is getting ready to the point where they probably need to start downsizing, maybe you can give some examples of some of their friends, or you read a story, or you saw something. Yeah. If it's appropriate, you could talk about, the fact that like you as the child, like you don't want to like go through all of this like later on. You want to do it now. Like let's spend time now. Like I don't want to have to do this later. And what do you think? Like ask them like where their head is at. Like, well, what do you think about this? Or how do you want to approach it? And just see what they say. Yeah. Maybe they have an idea. Yeah. And it has to be like, don't wait for the right time, right? Because there might never be a right time. Yeah. And depending on finances and, there's a lot of things that go into it, but it also doesn't like, it could just be like, hey mom, like I want to help you clean out your garage this weekend. Like I've got like, there's no soccer games this weekend, no baseball happening. What if we just like clean out your garage so you can park your car in it? Like start there. You don't necessarily have to get that like, you're going to move into an assisted living in 2 years. Like don't go there. Like start small. And then it's really, it's daily habits. So if you are bringing a lot if you're shopping at Home Goods and you're shopping at all these places and bringing a lot into your home, you need to constantly be, having things leave your home. And then I guess just from like an organization or staging, it's, I guess asking, where their head is at and, knowing your family member and you don't want to set them off.
And sometimes too, it's even like you said, it's kind of picking the right time. And I don't know if it's the right time, but like with the holidays coming up, we're all going to be together inside.
Yeah.
And I feel like these are just natural times where like conversations like this come up because we're all together.
Yeah.
And it's so much better when we can talk in person about it instead of, let's just pick a day and we're all going to FaceTime.
Like, hey, Mom. I had a client, actually, two clients, adult women, for the holidays and for their birthdays. They gave a gift certificate of my services to them. And they said, Mom, like, I'm not giving you anything tangible. You don't need anything.
Yeah.
But here are 3 hours of an organizing service, and you use her however you want.
Nice.
I won't be there. Right? Like, I don't have to I don't tell the daughter or the son like what we did.
Yeah.
I have a nice 3-hour session with them. I haul away donations that they don't want.
Yeah.
And they can kind of start understanding, like, oh, okay, it's kind of nice to be able to sit down over here or pull the car in the garage.
Yeah.
So that could be a great avenue as well, as like, hey, you already have everything you need, but I'm going to help you get organized.
Yeah. That's a great gift too. It's because sometimes, you're trying to figure out like the perfect thing for someone who doesn't need anything. And I think that's a great point.
Right.
All right. Yeah. So I guess to close up, what would you say for most people when it's kind of like, okay, what do they need to be doing like before they reach out to you? Again, this is a lot of times people think about these projects and they think about, okay, before I reach out, I need to get everything organized. Like, we think about that so we look good when you come in. But what would you say to someone who's kind of like, what do I need to do? I'm thinking about reaching out or starting this.
So, if you want to reach out, I encourage you to start the conversation, right? And in my intake form, and probably similar to you, right, is really simple questions like, what are your organizing goals, or where do you want to start? And honestly, those two questions, people are like, I don't know. It really makes them think.
Yeah.
So taking a step back, and then they're like, okay, it's the kitchen, or nope, it's really the kids' toys, or it's the garage or the attic. And so it forces them to, be a little bit more aware, right? But then also it's an investment, okay? You're not like, going on a 5-star vacation investment, but it is an investment that you have to know that like someone's coming into your home, and it's time, it's labor, it's, yes, there might be some product, but we don't have to buy product. I just organized a couple closets and dressers and drawers, and very minimal product was used. I used really what the client already had, and command hooks, and command, like, those are fantastic and inexpensive. But know that there's going to be some type of investment, a little bit of time, some money that you're going to put into this, but the reward is just that much more. When I walk away from homes, people are just, sometimes they're in tears. Sometimes they hug me a lot, and they're just like the weight of their shoulders. They're just like, oh my gosh, like no one has regretted hiring me, or another organizer, right? Because it really opens their eyes to like, oh, wow, I didn't know how to do it. And I teach them throughout the way, like, okay, we just did this space, but now you can go do that space.
Exactly. Now that they've kind of seen it once, and you kind of like see some of the steps along the way, so kind of like this process. That's what I feel like one of the biggest things that we're always telling people is that we want to give you confidence. Like that's what our clients get when they work with us. And it's really what's happening is you're getting this clarity because now you see where everything's at. So kind of the first step, we're organizing everything just like you are. You get clarity of here's what I can do, here's where I can take things or keep things, and now it's kind of this final step, and now you feel confident or you feel freedom from the worry, from the stress. You now have answers to those questions, and so it's just this very different place. And I think this is really going to help a lot of people just to think through kind of like, okay, that might be them, or this might be conversations that they need to have, and so this is really helping me to be able to think about how I can do that. So anything that you would say in closing that you want people to know or they should be thoughtful of, or,
I guess I'd also just add that Specifically for me, and I do know some local organizers who are great too, but there's no judgment. Like I go into homes and I see the potential, right? You don't have to worry that like it doesn't look great. That's why I'm here, Same with staging, right? It's not personal. It's the first thing I tell the client when I walk in. I'm like, listen, just like I said earlier, you live in a home, but we're selling a house, right? And my job is to appeal to as many people as possible. And so I'm like, it's not personal, right? Yeah. But from an organizing standpoint, there's no judgment. Yeah. So don't be afraid of that.
Yeah, that's so great, because I think these are the little but big things that can just get people stuck, and then they don't make the progress that they really want to. So they may not move ahead as early as they want to. So then ultimately those relationships, which is really what we're after, those relationships all throughout people's lives aren't being able to be furthered or strengthened. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish by taking out these things that don't have to be kind of sucking up some of that energy and some of the memories that are there.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. This is, I know I have learned a lot. This has been so helpful, and I know people will take things away. Yeah, well, thank you. So this is just a great way to start the conversation. Ashley, you said it best, like just start the conversation. And it doesn't have to be, okay, this is what we need to achieve. It's just starting it, being empathetic and saying, hey, I'm here to help. And I really want us to have a great relationship. I love you. And so what is it, that you want? So whatever point you're at, this is really where we're kind of saying, like, we know that these can be big steps for people to take in all of these areas, whether it's your finances, whether it's your home or transitioning to a different home. So just, these are resources that we're creating. Be sure to sign up for our biweekly email where we summarize all of these conversations we're having, blog posts that we write, and just, a couple episodes that kind of tie really well to this. If you're looking for more podcast episodes, just how to manage aging parents' finances. We've talked about estate planning, kind of this estate planning checklist, and then a podcast talking about that. So we've got a lot of resources. Hopefully this is a great start for you to start these conversations. But thank you so much, Ashley, for joining us. And for everybody else, we will see you on the next episode.
Thanks for listening. To find any links or resources related to this episode, check out our show notes. Your host was Michelle Smallenberger, a certified financial planner and CEO. The guests featured are from Financial Design Studio, a team of experienced fiduciary, fee-only advisors based in Chicago. Anna Lewis is the executive producer of the Behind the Designs podcast. And as always, for more information about Financial Design Studio and who we are, check out our website, financialdesignstudio.com. And final note, no content discussed on this podcast should be taken as financial advice. Financial Design Studio accepts no responsibility for your individual choices. We'll see you in the next episode.